Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name's Chloe Green, and I'm going to be your moderator today for the 8th episode of Food and the Wisconsin Idea. And so just a little bit to start off about who I am, because it was my first Food and the Wisconsin Idea last time. And since this month's host is the Kaufman Lab, for the study and design of food systems and marketplaces, which I am the advocacy and research operations specialist for, we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what I do on campus and how it all relates to Food in the Wisconsin Idea to open up. So, as I just said, I work for the Kaufman Lab. I'm also a senior undergraduate here at UW-Madison, and I am a dual degree in dietetics and community and environmental sociology. I also I'm currently a Wisconsin Idea Fellow, where I work on a project called A Farmer's Market for All, ? So I go to markets across the state and I look at the accessibility of farmers markets. So that's kind of my interest in food. And the reason why we created Food in the Wisconsin Idea is kind of to talk about all around the state and all of your interests in food, which is why we think you're all here today. So we have 6 different hosts of Food in the Wisconsin Idea, one of which, as I kind of mentioned, is the Kaufman Lab for the study and design of food systems and marketplaces, and that's our host for this month. We all do really cool stuff all across the state, and we want to come here to talk about different topics and to actually turn this into more of a conversation. Okay, and one more thing that I want to mention before we all get started is that we have a great sponsor for this part of the Food in the Wisconsin Idea, which is the Willie Street Co-op, which I love here in town. And they're based in Madison and Middleton. And to thank them, we have a 90-second video.
Willie Street Co-op is proud to be a supporter of Food in the Wisconsin Idea. Cooperatives around the state of Wisconsin have traditionally been at the forefront of bringing natural and organic foods to their customers. Cooperatives the world over are governed by 7 cooperative principles, and the 7th co-op principle is concern for community. Concern for our farmers, supporting their livelihood, keeping money in our community. For 44 years, we have worked diligently to grow our local food system. That's actually part of our mission statement, so it's really core to what we do every single day.
Thank you to Willie Street Co-op. So I'd first like to invite a couple of our first speakers up. So we have Alfonso Morales online, and then Dr. Phil Warsaw and Charlotte Litjens, who are going to come join me. So as I said, the basic premise of today is to discuss farm to institution or farm to big cafeteria. So we have a lot of different ways that can be talked about and different ways that we're working in that. So first, the Kaufman Lab is the host, and the director of the Kaufman Lab is also my boss or supervisor, which is Dr. Alfonso Morales. And he's joining us via Zoom, even though he does work here on campus. So let's start by just asking him, where are you today?
Hey, can y'all hear me? Let's do a quick audio check. Can you hear me, Chloe?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. So I'm sorry. Hi, I'm calling from Deming, New Mexico, where I'm visiting my parents their place about 6 miles south of Deming. I would show you my mom over here in her chair, but she's actually napping right now. So anyways, I'm glad to see you all, though.
Cool. And so you got to decide the topic for this month, as we do with Food in the Wisconsin Idea. So can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to talk about this topic today and why it matters?
Yes, absolutely. Institutional food purchasing is probably the largest segment of the food economy outside of production. Hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year on institutional food purchasing, and those purchases, to the degree that they can be made more local and through tighter supply chains, means a huge economic opportunity for local food businesses, local farmers, local supply chains, local economies, generally speaking, in the same way that the co-op video described that principles of cooperative economies. Same opportunity, more broadly through the use of more food purchasing by institutions.
Sorry. We know that you do some work with this, and also with Dr. Phil Warsaw, who's sitting next to me. Did you want to say anything briefly about Phil before? Okay.
First of all, I want to throw out a couple of examples for folks about the power of food buying. One of those is a project that Phil and I have under review as a grant application, is to work with hospitals in southern Wisconsin. Now, one of the opportunities that provides is for local farmers to sell food to those hospitals. Now, in Upland Hills Hospital, about 30 miles south of Wisconsin in Dodgeville, it turns out that hospital sources some of its food from the Fifth Season Cooperative, a cooperative that itself has its roots in another hospital, Gunderson Lutheran in La Crosse. That hospital's interest in supplying 20% of its own purchases from local and regional producers. So this sort of reciprocal and iterative process that has been going on for many years now, actually, is producing more and tighter connections between farmers, food businesses, and institutions like hospitals. Some of this work is also traceable to farm-to-school programs, which are, of course, much older, 25 years old in Wisconsin, probably, as we can trace back our thinking in farm-to-school for upwards of 20 years. And I've been fortunate enough to have followed some of that work as well. And the same principle applies. How it is that the existing infrastructure of schools or hospitals or other public cafeterias can be leveraged in support of broader-based community and economic development. So now, having said that, let me just say there, Chloe, to your left, I believe, is my colleague, Dr. Phil Warsaw, who's an economics PhD of the University of Wisconsin and a National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow here at Wisconsin, and soon to be assistant professor at Michigan State University. Our loss is their huge gain. I would be remiss if I didn't also say he's a new father, because these things are the most, in my view, these parenting roles that we play and these social roles that we play are as important to mention and remember and make room for as any role that we play. However, having said that, I've been fortunate to be acquainted with Phil since his dissertation research and been very fortunate to have been working with him now for about a year and some, almost 2 years maybe, on our Farm to Hospital project that includes the University of Wisconsin Hospital, Upland Hills, and if the grant is funded, a number of other hospitals across southern Wisconsin and perhaps elsewhere, depending upon how it goes. So there we go. Phil, if you don't mind, I think that, or Chloe, let me just punt it to you. Thank you very much, folks, for coming to the show, and I hope that this is of benefit to everybody.
Thanks, Alfonso. Okay. I don't think I can say a much better introduction than Alfonso did, besides that I also work with Phil, and he's been doing really great work that we're excited to hear about.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the project that Alfonso was mentioning in our work engaged with UW Hospital and American Family Children's Hospital, trying to build a data collection software in order to help facilitate the procurement of local foods within their hospital. So, to give a little background, the reason why we think that hospitals are particularly interesting is for a couple of reasons. The first is that over the last decade or so, the number of meals that hospitals have been serving in general has risen, and the share of those meals that are going to non-patients or say retail meals is also growing. So there is an opportunity here to, from an economic perspective, to really see a significant change if we can tap into that. Secondly, hospitals as institutions are increasing their social engagement efforts. That is, they are not just seeking to increase the number of meals that they are serving, but are hoping to use those meals in order to affect social change. So these social changes are, there are two in particular. First, they want to build more sustainable food systems, and secondly, they're hoping to see better health outcomes in those who are coming to eat meals in their retail operations. And so there's both the opportunity and also desire to affect change. And this is indicated in part by the growth in in online toolkits such as Project Green Health, which are designed to help institutions such as hospitals to be able to build plans to build more sustainable food systems. And so we're working, as I mentioned before, with UW Hospital and American Family Children's Hospital in particular, and they've been engaged in this work for a number of years now, and there are a number of changes that they've engaged in over the last few years that I could discuss, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to focus specifically on the fact that their local food procurement has grown significantly over the last 4 years. And so by their own admission, they've told us that their procurement of local food in 2014 was relatively minimal, but in the last few years, that has grown from that point up to 20% of their total food purchases. And in dollar amounts, that's a little over $2 million in 2017. In our conversations with them as we were preparing this last round of grants, they've indicated they would like to see that number grow from about 21% upwards to 30% over the next couple of years. And so, again, this is an institution that has both the purchasing power in terms of the amount of food that they're purchasing, but also the desire to see that share of food that's local grow, which makes them interesting to work with. And so there's one campaign that I want to quickly highlight that they've used in conjunction with their change in procurement strategies in order to help facilitate broad-scale change, which is their Harvest of the Month campaign. So each month, the hospital highlights one specific produce item, which they then feature throughout their cafeteria. And they also engage in a number of promotional activities, demos, meet a farmer days, et cetera, where they encourage consumers to eat locally by eating products that feature this produce item. And overall, these changes have been successful both in terms of changing consumer behavior and also, of course, as we've seen, increasing the amount of food that they're purchasing locally. However, in our communications with them, they've indicated that there are a number of challenges which have up to this point prevented them from engaging in the change at the scale and the pace at which they want to that we're hoping to address. And there are two that I want to highlight here. The first is organizational challenges. And so Alfonso would be better suited to speak about this, but I'm going to try my best to highlight the issue here. So in essence, whenever you make a change, especially when you're talking about someone's food, it's not uncommon to get some pushback. And so while this doesn't relate specifically to local food, one example with UW Hospital is about 2 years ago, I believe it was about 2 years ago, they removed all of these sugar-sweetened beverages out of their retail operations and replaced that with a large selection of sparkling water and other still beverages that were not sweetened. And the pushback that they received, as you can imagine, was pretty fierce and immediate. And so while this was only one change in conjunction with many other changes, it's one of those situations where once you start making some change and people push back against it, then there's more reticence to continue that change moving forward. And so when you're talking about a large organization, which already tends to move a little bit slowly on these issues, now you're adding additional roadblocks that have to be overcome. Making that more difficult, and this is where Alfonso and I are particularly hoping to address, is when you're trying to affect that change, it obviously helps to be able to come in with evidence-based practices to say, look, we've done X, Y, and Z, and we've seen these results. However, to accomplish that, you need have the data to be able to do so. And when you're talking about people who have full-time jobs already doing other things that are not data collection, it can be hard then to put together data from disparate places to then create a single data set that you need to be able to demonstrate why procuring food from these locations is going to lead to these outcomes, which makes it beneficial for these reasons. And so our goal with our project is to build a data collection software which helps centralize all the data that you need to be able to make the connection between procurement strategies and sales outcomes and also health outcomes. And the base for this software is an existing software that Alfonso Morales developed, which is MyFi, which is short for Metrics and Indicators for Impact. It's a software suite of data collection tools, which is geared towards farmer markets in order to collect basic metrics such as number of vendors at a market each week, the total sales receipts, weather, et cetera, which allows farmers markets managers to be able to understand the trends that lead to greater sales or greater foot traffic in their farmers markets. And so what we're hoping to do is to take that same software and essentially redesign it to be usable for hospitals. And so the name that we're giving it tentatively is MyFi HC, so MyFi Hospitals and Clinics. And what we want to do is, in addition to tracking this point of sales data, which hospitals already do, what we want to do is in a single place also be able to track procurement data. So how much food are they bringing in from different sources, locally and non-locally, and also combine that with their promotional activities. So things like the Harvest of the Month campaign, demos that might be going on within their retail operations within a given day, so that we can in one place have the sales data and also the campaigns that go with it, so then we can more easily make those causative or correlative arguments as to whether or not these changes are being or affecting positive change. And in doing so, we can reduce the burden on administrators to be able to make those conclusions and make the arguments for affecting change in their organizations.
Thank you. So MyFi, which he mentioned, is also primarily what I work on in the lab, and I'm on, as he said, the farmers market side. So they're trying to expand this data collection toolkit to also work with hospitals. So, like I just said, in the same lab, we're working on farmers markets and hospitals. So there's a lot of different ways to look at local food. As I said, I'm also a dietetics student, so we talk about local food in hospitals a lot in my food service management class. So it is a bigger and bigger thing. So maybe check it out at the next hospital you're at to see what they're serving. Something else that I think that people really commonly think about with farm to institution is farm to school. So today we have Charlotte Litjens here with us, who is the director of farm to school at the Wisconsin Department of Ag, or otherwise known as StatCap. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chloe, and thanks for having me today. So as she said, my job is farm to school and institution at our Department of Agriculture here, and that's actually broken up into a bunch of different pieces. So the really fun part of my job is working with folks like Vanessa Harold back in the corner here, and the Wisconsin Farm to School Network, which is built of people that have been doing farm to school and getting creative in their communities and figuring out how to make this really great idea of getting this fresh local food to students, even though it's often the farmers aren't making much money and the schools don't have much of a budget. So it's a very difficult thing to make happen in reality, but we have an army of really hardworking food service directors, community advocates, parent groups, and farmers and farm organizations around the state. So a big part of my job that's very enjoyable is helping support that and helping people connect resources and get out newsletters and all of that. The challenging part of my job is the making it happen part. So working on supply chains and trying to turn this all into the economic development that Phil's referencing. So with that, an example of that would be dairy. So right now we have a surplus of milk in our country and in Wisconsin, and I've had several dairy producers call me up and say, why can't I sell my milk in my nearby school district? They won't call me back. I would love to do that. I'll deliver it. I have on-farm processing. I'm ready to go. And so doing some research on that supply chain, you realize that school milk has very little markup for farmers. So they're not going to make much money, and it's very competitive. The way that schools bid out for milk is dictated by very strict federal procurement rules, and usually the bottom line is going to be price, right? So our larger multi-state milk processors usually win those contracts. If a school wants to go outside of that, how does the milk get to the kid? So that's actually a really big, fascinating hang-up that I've discovered so far in my research. Filling those little, they call them gable top cardboard cartons that we all probably had when we were young, takes a machine that's about $500,000. So you're looking at a small local dairy processor would have to go into debt about $500,000 to make maybe, a penny per carton of milk markup. So trying to figure out ways around that. And we have the National Farm to School Network, which is a really wonderful network that shares projects and pilots, and it's a good store of information and research like this. They've provided a lot of examples of local milk working in schools with different models of whether it's on the a la carte line, it's given to sports teams in a different kind of package than that really difficult cardboard carton that doesn't actually taste very good, or if it's a bulk milk dispenser, so a little refrigerated thing that's filling cups for kids. And so with a project like that, we're talking about everything from helping the farmer get financing to do this, figuring out the equipment issues, and then going into the school, helping with taste tests, helping food service directors and even custodians in the cafeteria get used to this completely new way of serving and presenting the product to the children. So that's just a little run through of the world of trying to make farm to school work for a specific product.
Thanks, Charlotte. So now that we've given you kind of an overview about what Farm to Institution is, we want to do something that was pretty successful last month, which is Breakout Rooms. So in our in-studio audience, I'm hoping that you will either turn to the person next to you or a group of people around you, maybe some that you don't know, discuss some questions that I'm going to give you. And then for our Zoom audience, Greg, our fearless tech leader, is going to throw you all into 2 or 3 different rooms, and you're either going to be joined by Jessica Jane Spade, who was our host last month, or with Charlotte. And I'm asking you to please discuss some questions that are, what farm to cafeteria or farm to institution work are you doing right now, if any? And what are some obstacles that you're maybe facing with that? And then after we do that, we're going to come back and hear from some more speakers. But before that, also, please maybe choose someone from your group to report out, because we want to hear what you're all talking about. Oh, and if you're on Zoom, please don't be shy, especially if you're going to be in a smaller group. Turn on your mics, turn on your cameras, use your chat box, and I'll talk. It's going to be about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Getting that made into a position in schools, if anyone else has dealt with that before.
Come back. And is there anyone who wants to say a couple things about what their group talked about?
We mostly just talked about different barriers and how that there are so many, and there are many aspects that you can kind of work on things. So maybe not any specific points, but just kind of saying that it's there. Yeah, and it's hard.
Is there anyone else in the studio audience who wants to say anything, report anything especially important? All right. What about online? We know you all like to talk. You still want to keep the conversation going. Is there anyone
You've never even met me yet.
Kristen? Okay.
I said you've never even met me yet. You already know I like to talk.
People say that about me all the time.
Well, one of the things, so we're at Rush. We're trying to really build our local community and local purveyors. But I did agree when they were talking about the milk and the packaging, you know, it seems like an easy project to get people kind of to get their product to us. They're close to us, trying to get it to us. But we have a couple barriers. We have a contract with Cisco Food Service and Gordon Food Service, and we're held accountable for purchasing 80% of our products from those vendors. So then what we're trying to do is make sure that extra 20% that is at full, you know, fingertips to us, is that we're really trying to pull in these local purveyors and kind of vet them into our system. One of the things that we are actively doing right now, and it's not necessarily for the main hospital patient care or employee food in our own cafeterias, but it's vetting caterers in the area, bringing them in and then helping them market, helping them advertise, and creating lists for our establishments that any money that's hospital funded. So if anybody has to have a meeting, we are saying, okay, this money has to be spent on these particular vendors. So helping kind of force that hand, but then not just saying, hey, these are the lists of the people in the area, have at it. We're bringing them in and kind of letting them know what we're looking for, that they need to be available. These are kind of our expectations, because we don't also want to hinder or hurt them, because if we have kind of an expectation and we're saying we're going to be using our money here, but then they can't provide the service, you know, we want to help them in a different way. So one example was this particular caterer in the area, they couldn't provide anything same day. So if you wanted to put in a catering order, you had to have a huge lead time, which is fine, but we need to make sure that if we put these people on the list, that we're not forgetting to mention that, because you can imagine if somebody is saying, okay, Rush is approving this vendor, we're going to use this vendor, I have a meeting tomorrow, I'm heard this group is great, but oh shoot, they are not available. So you can see how it can backfire. So that right now is kind of exciting. We're trying to get all these local people in, but the harder part is to kind of bridge the gap of what our contract is 20% with the Cisco and Gordon, and then really working with them saying, you guys need to make sure you're buying local when you're buying that.
Okay. Yeah, important things to think about. Thank you, Kristen. So there's obviously a lot of things to talk about with this. So we're going to our second round of speakers. So I'd like to please invite Helen up here from REAP Food Group. And then we're also going to be seeing Ben Thomas soon. So Helen is the executive director at REAP Food Group, which is a local nonprofit here in Madison, and then they do a lot of stuff throughout the state. So you're my community partner for my fellowship. Yeah, specifically Farm Fresh Atlas, which is a really cool program.
I want to hear a couple of minutes. So I was asked to maybe complement some of the stuff you've heard come from speakers earlier. And as I was listening to Charlotte and Dr. Warsaw talk, one of the thoughts I had was how REAP fits into the puzzle in the state. And Dr. Warsaw, you made reference to how you guys are looking at, with regards to getting local procurement in institutions, really focusing on the community and organizational challenges. And I would say an accurate way to talk about how REAP fits into all of this is we really look at the logistical and supply chain challenges in terms of procurement. So that's one piece of what we do. Colloquially, I always refer to it as the sausage making, because REAP, one of our bigger programs is Farm to School. So we are in schools educating children about sustainability, nutrition, and agriculture. And we are also behind the scenes working with food service director and staff to figure out how to bring more of that local food into schools. And we've had a project where we've been working very deeply with MMSD, our second largest school district in the state, and essentially being a problem solver, handholder, a key person who can get questions answered and help untie knots. The sausage making. And I think it's been really seminal in moving things forward because it is slow and bumpy progress. And so I think a piece of where we've seen successes in Wisconsin is we develop relationships, trust relationships as well, to try things. So asking a food service director who's got, as we were talking about in our group, $1 per meal to spend and asking them to take a risk on a locally sourced product, that's a huge risk. And that's one of 25 risks they're taking every day, trying to cobble together magic from, dust. And so having those relationships in place and getting to be at a table in their offices twice a week and just letting them know you've got their back, and then at the same time pushing for change, has been one of the ways I think we've managed to be so successful in moving the needles we have. Long way to go, but I would argue we've made some amazing progress in the state to start bringing more local food, at least into farm to school. With UW Hospital and American Family Children's Hospital, we sort of served a similar role. As a nonprofit partner to the hospital, we help them do some of the legwork to look up what sustainability policies look like, introduce them to farmers, actually organized farm tours with people, and did some of the matchmaking when it was needed and ad hoc problem solving. Not that they needed much help. That was a hospital with leadership that was ready to take the step to be an anchor institution and to really walk the walk of being an anchor institution. But that's what our nonprofit has really served, that role of being a person in place to help solve problems so we can make progress.
Thank you. Yeah, REAP really does awesome work. And then someone else that we just wanted to also hear some of the work they're doing is Ben Thomas, who's joining us from Sacramento, California via Zoom. And he works for Community Alliance with Family Farmers. So Ben,
hey, how's it going? Can everybody hear me okay?
Awesome. Hey Ben, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. All right. So a couple things I want to jump into, and I'm going to echo that, the sentiments about relationships and about serving that role. But first, I've been thinking leading up to this call about how much we're doing in California, where it seems like there's like this generally progressive culture and people have a lot of ideas about how that can make for an easier path to farm to school and hospital. But right now, for example, we're working on a California crunch based on Wisconsin work and work with Vanessa, who's there, I know, in the room, where I just based an RFP with Oakland Unified off of Minneapolis Central Schools, and basing one of our big hospital projects right now on what we learned at the National Farm to Cafeteria Conference from University of Wisconsin-Madison's hospital. And so there you have, it's all right there and in your own communities. And so I think I appreciate the opportunity to be here as a guest. But with that said, I think there's a perception that with the larger budgets of hospitals or schools, with the larger contracts to vendors, that there should be more wiggle room. And thinking that there's two major issues there. One is that school and hospital food service is often the only department within those institutions that's expected to operate totally independently of their general funds and as businesses. And so those people that you're talking to don't have much wiggle room, and they're under incredible regulatory stress and pressure and price stress and pressure. That goes too for their vendors. So their vendors, although it might be $1 million or $2 million or $10 million or $20 million contract, it might be at an incredibly low profit margin. And so we found the most success in trying to really partner on both sides, not to vilify anybody and to look at incremental change. Because once you can identify, that one area that we can make a difference, and you can start to see that change come into fruition, that mindset opens up a lot to what other work can be done. And more than that, the business proposition and the business value then comes through. And so we can talk more about that. But I think that's the biggest nutshell explanation of what we've seen to be able to move that dial. And it really has been through those slow incremental relationships and meeting everyone along the chain where they're at.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks for joining us all the way from California. So I think we've heard a lot of interesting things so far, a lot of really cool work that's going on and progress that's being made, and then a lot of barriers that we still have to deal with every day and just make more creative ways to deal with them. Is there anyone here who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to make any last comments? Or maybe on Zoom you can raise your hand, turn your mic on. Or so I'd like to say thank you again to everyone who has come here for our 8th episode in our beta season here for Food in the Wisconsin Idea. Thank you to the Kaufman Lab for employing me and also for hosting this event. And to Dr. Alfonso Morales, Dr. Phil Warsaw, Charlotte Litjens, Helen, Sarakinos. I was nervous I was going to say it wrong, but you know, it's all good. And then to Ben Thomas, and also to Willie Street Co-op, which I need to go to soon because I love them. And we hope to see you all back here on November 14th, or via Zoom. You can join as well if you're not here. That's going to be with Steve Ventura. Okay. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, everyone on Zoom for coming. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks for having us.